Many believe that to move forward, they need constant support, emotional backing, an environment that pushes them. They wait for someone to motivate them, rescue them, accompany them at every step. But that thought weakens them, because if your strength depends on others, your path will always be unstable. Tracy, have learned that great advances happen when one decides to walk alone, not out of pride, but out of conviction, not because you don't need anyone, but because you no longer depend on anyone. When you learn to fight alone, you discover your true power. You become firm, focused, unstoppable, because you understand that discipline, purpose, and resilience are born in the silence of your own decisions. You don't need company, you need determination. And when you act from that inner strength, the world stops seeming like an obstacle and becomes the stage for your transformation. The first principle I had to embrace to change my life was accepting that no one will come to save me. No one. No matter how much love they have for you, how much support they promise, how close they are, there are battles that only you can fight. Dark moments where not even the wisest advice, nor the warmest embrace, nor the most sincere help is enough. Because there are pains that must be felt in solitude, decisions that only you can make, paths that only you can walk. And the sooner you accept that, the faster you stop waiting, the faster you get up, the faster you take control. For years I waited for someone to see my effort, for someone to understand my struggle, for someone to lift me up in my falls. I didn't do it maliciously. I did it out of weariness, out of the need to feel supported. But that desire tied me down, made me vulnerable, because deep down I still believed that my progress depended on others. Until one day, in the midst of a brutal fall, I realized I was alone. No one else could make that decision for me. No one else could put one foot in front of the other. No one else could sustain me in that abyss. Either I did it, or I wouldn't get out of there. That was my awakening. The moment I stopped looking for external hands and started building internal strength was not sudden. It was not with pretty phrases, it was with pain, with silence, with a determination I had never felt before. I began to do what had to be done without expecting recognition. I started to fulfill my commitments, even if no one was watching, to sustain myself from within, even if everything seemed to be collapsing from the outside, because I understood that true character is not formed in company, it is forged in solitude. And that solitude, which initially frightened me, became my teacher. It showed me who I was when I had no one to impress. It forced me to listen to myself, to ask myself what I truly wanted, what I was willing to sacrifice, what I could no longer postpone. It taught me to trust my judgment, my intuition, my ability to rebuild myself without applause. Because when no one supports you, you learn to walk with firmness, not because you are the strongest, but because you have no other choice. And that urgency brings out a strength you didn't even know you had. Since then, I stopped waiting. I no longer seek to be understood, or validated, or rescued. I took charge, and in that act, I found a freedom I had never felt before. Because when you no longer depend on anyone, what you build is yours, what you achieve belongs to you, what you advance is real. I learned that there is nothing more powerful than a man who no longer needs company to move, who needs no witnesses to commit, who needs no comfort to remain firm. He only needs a reason, a vision, and the unwavering will to continue, even if it's alone, especially if it's alone, because that's where everything begins. That's where true power is formed. The second principle that became a law in my life was to stop begging for emotional support, because there is a harsh but necessary truth. The more you depend on the encouragement of others, the more fragile your progress will be. It is natural to want to be heard, to be understood, to be encouraged, but if you make that need a condition, you are giving away your power. Because no one is obligated to motivate you. No one is indebted to you. Everyone has their own world, their own battles, their own limits. And if you expect to be lifted up every time you fall, you will be left waiting while your opportunity grows cold. I lived it. I shared my goals with enthusiasm, hoping for encouragement. I spoke of my falls, expecting understanding. I exposed my wounds, expecting empathy. And when I didn't get what I needed, I became frustrated. I felt betrayed. But it wasn't betrayal, it was reality. Life doesn't revolve around my emotions. No one is obligated to support me. An understanding that didn't make me cold, it made me strong. Because the day I let go of the expectation of being understood, I began to walk with a new lightness. Suddenly, my steps were mine. My motivation didn't depend on external reactions. I started to get up by conviction, not by applause. I learned that the most powerful support doesn't come from outside. It comes from the respect you earn from yourself, from the commitment you maintain even if no one recognizes it, from the silent effort you make without expecting a reward. Because when you manage to stay firm on your gray days, when you advance without witnesses, when you build without anyone celebrating it, something within you changes. You look at yourself differently, you respect yourself more, and that respect cannot be bought. It is forged in solitude, in exhaustion, in repetition without applause. Stopping begging for support doesn't mean closing yourself off to love or deep relationships. It means you are no longer building from a place of lack. You are no longer advancing with the hope of being rescued. You are advancing because you know who you are. Because you are no longer looking for someone to complete you. You are completing yourself. That difference is everything. Because a man who takes charge of his emotions stops demanding understanding and starts offering stability. He no longer needs, he chooses. He no longer asks, he creates. He no longer begs, he sustains himself. And when that happens, your presence changes. People perceive you differently because you are complete, because you don't need validation to have direction, because you can be surrounded by people or absolutely alone, and your vision remains firm. You are no longer guided by the fear of abandonment, but by the commitment to your purpose. You no longer act to be seen, you act because you know where you are going. And if someone accompanies you, great. But if not, you still go with your head held high, with firm feet, with your will intact. That is what makes the difference between a man who tries and one who achieves. The one who achieves doesn't wait for pats on the back, doesn't seek approval, just takes a deep breath, grits his teeth, and keeps going because he knows that what he is building doesn't need an audience. It only needs discipline, focus, and the determination to fight even if it's completely alone, especially when it's completely alone, because that's where the version of you that changes everything is formed, where no one sees you. The third principle I forged with blood and conviction was to stop complaining. Complaining may seem harmless, even human, but it's actually one of the most destructive habits that exist. Every time you complain, you are telling yourself that you have no power, that circumstances are stronger than your will, that the problem has more force than your decision, and that imprints itself, becoming an internal dialogue that erodes your spirit, your identity, your action. Complaining is the language of men who have given up on building. I spent years complaining about the lack of opportunities, the injustices of the system, about others, about myself. I complained because it seemed fair, because I felt I was right, and maybe I was. But complaining never solved anything. It never made me stronger. It never brought me closer to my goals. On the contrary, it weakened me, made me feel like a victim, made me expect external solutions, pushed me to cynicism, to think that nothing is worth it, that nothing changes, that it's better to give up. And in that state, one begins to die while alive. Until one day, looking in the mirror, I confronted myself with a brutal question. How much of what hurts me have I sustained myself by not doing what I know I have to do? How much have I fueled with my passivity, with my excuses, with my complaints? The answer was painful, but it freed me because it stripped away the mask of victimhood and returned control to me. From that moment, I decided to become someone who acts, not someone who laments. Someone who observes what is wrong and confronts it, not with complaints, but with work, not with words, but with results. I began to replace every complaint with a powerful question. What can I do about this? Not, what should the world do? Not, what should the other person change? What can I do? And that question, repeated every day, transformed me. Where I previously saw walls, I began to see pathways. Where I previously felt anger, I began to feel momentum. Where I previously wanted to give up, I began to make decisions. I became the protagonist, the creator, someone who no longer waits, but acts. And in that silent action, I began to regain self-respect, because when one complains, one loses dignity, but when one acts, even with fear, with doubt, with exhaustion, one rises. Life remains difficult. Injustices do not disappear, but you are no longer the same. You are no longer kneeling before difficulty. You are standing, moving. And that changes everything. Because the world gives nothing to the one who complains, but it opens doors to the one who insists, to the one who gets up, to the one who takes what little they have and turns it into fire. Today, if something hurts me, I don't complain, I move. If something is missing, I don't lament, I build it. If something outrages me, I don't shout, I act. And if I am alone, if no one understands, if no one applauds me, I continue just the same. Because I now understand that those who grow accustomed to complaining need company to justify their paralysis. But those who fight in silence need no justifications, only direction, determination, and the firm decision to never again say, I can't, because you can. You just have to start, and shut your mouth, and grit your teeth, and move. Even if it's alone, especially if it's alone. The fourth principle that became an unbreakable law in my life was building my own discipline when no one was demanding anything. It's easy to be diligent when you have someone overseeing you, when you know someone is watching, when you have deadlines, rules, structures that compel you. But when you're alone, when there's no one to call you out if you fail, when there are no immediate external consequences, that's where your true mettle is defined. Because real growth happens in intimacy, in that space where no one sees, but you perfectly know whether you fulfilled your commitment or not. I realized that as long as I had bosses, teachers, deadlines, I stayed on track. But as soon as those structures disappeared, my strength would crumble. I'd promise myself things I wouldn't do. I'd set plans I wouldn't execute. I'd let myself down. And since no one noticed, I'd make excuses. But there was someone who did notice. Me. And every time I failed in secret, every time I procrastinated without anyone holding me accountable, something within me weakened. Because you can deceive everyone but yourself. And living with yourself when you know you're not doing what you should is a silent condemnation. It was then I understood that I had to become my own authority, my own system, my own leader. No one was going to wake me up early. No one was going to tell me to stop wasting time. No one was going to demand commitment from me. All of that had to originate from within. And when that realization settles in, it changes how you move. You stop acting to please others. You start acting to avoid betraying yourself. Because your word becomes sacred. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. Not because someone is watching, but because you said it. And that's enough. This type of discipline isn't taught. It's built day by day. Uncomfortable, yes. Painful at times, but profoundly liberating. Because you reach a point where you no longer need external structures. You no longer need anyone to correct you. Laziness no longer stops you, and emotion no longer distracts you. You no longer need motivation. You just need to remember who you are and act in alignment. You become a person who moves by decision, not by circumstance, who acts even when they don't feel like it, who follows through even when no one is watching, who advances even when they are completely alone. And if you're listening to this, I want you to engrave this in your mind. Your discipline is your freedom. It is not a prison. It is a silent declaration that you no longer depend on anything or anyone to move forward, that you can uphold your word even on your worst days, that you can keep your promises without witnesses, without rewards, without external stimulus. And that's where true self-respect is born, because you see yourself becoming the kind of person you vowed to be, and that is priceless. Subscribe if this message is resonating with you. This channel is for those who are building their character in the dark, for those who are forging a version of themselves that doesn't need spotlights to exist. And tell me in the comments what habit you are willing to uphold without anyone demanding it. Write it down, not for me to see, but for you to declare. Because when you commit in silence, life truly begins to move. Because discipline isn't what you do when you're inspired. It's what you choose when no one is looking, especially when you are completely alone. The fifth principle I ingrained deep within my routine was learning to become my own source of validation. One of the most common and costly mistakes is believing you need someone to tell you you're doing well to continue, that you need approval, recognition, or an external voice to confirm your path is valid. But as long as you seek validation externally, you will remain fragile, because external validation is volatile, inconsistent, and often tainted by the fears and limitations of others. If you don't learn to validate yourself, you'll be at the mercy of anyone's opinion. I spent years waiting for that "well done," that "I admire you," that "you're on the right track." And when it came, I felt strong, But when it didn't, I deflated. I'd start doubting, reconsidering everything, questioning decisions that stemmed from my deepest convictions. And then I understood that the problem wasn't that others didn't see my value. The problem was that I myself doubted it, because knowing what I was doing was correct wasn't enough. I needed others to tell me so. Until one day, in the midst of a frustrated night, I asked myself, do I really need someone to approve of the life I'm building? What kind of man do I want to be? One who walks by conviction, or one who needs to be applauded to move forward? That night marked the beginning of a new version of myself. The version that no longer waits, no longer asks, no longer depends. I started looking at myself honestly every day and asking, were you consistent? Did you give your best? Did you move with purpose? And if the answer was yes, then I didn't need anyone else to say it. I knew it, and that was enough. Because when your internal standard is stronger than external opinion, you no longer hold yourself back, you don't let yourself be contaminated, you don't dilute yourself to fit in. You become solid, determined, internally armored. And it wasn't an immediate change, it was daily training. Learning to acknowledge my progress, even if no one celebrated it. Learning to hold on to my vision, even if the world didn't understand it. Learning to walk with my head held high, even if the entire environment made me feel invisible. Because when you validate yourself from within, every step you take is an act of self-respect. You're no longer seeking to be seen. You're seeking to be at peace with yourself. And that peace is non-negotiable. This habit taught me that I don't need applause to know I'm growing. I don't need gazes to feel like I'm doing well, because the man who validates himself is the freest. He can make mistakes without collapsing. He can succeed without becoming arrogant. He can be alone and still walk with firmness because his compass isn't external, it's in his soul. And when that compass is well calibrated, nothing stops him. Since then, I applaud myself internally. I give myself credit when I follow through. I confront myself when I fail. I correct myself with respect. I direct myself with intention. There is no stage, no audience, just a constant conversation with myself, because I understood that true respect is not begged for, it is built. And if you want others to respect you, start by stopping the begging for their approval. Value yourself in silence, validate yourself. And the world, sooner or later, will respond to that inner strength that no longer needs permission to exist. The sixth principle that I ingrained as a steadfast habit was learning to rise quickly after falling. Not with pretty words, not with internal consolation speeches, but with action, with firm steps, with immediate decisions. Because I understood that no matter how disciplined you are, how strong you are, how clear you are, you will fall, you will fail. You will have days where you betray what you said you would do. You will break your routine. You will give in to impulse. And right there, that's where it's defined whether you are truly committed or just temporarily motivated. Because anyone can be strong when everything flows smoothly, but true character is revealed after the mistake. I used to punish myself severely when I failed. A lost day would lead to a week of guilt. A bad decision would turn into an internal monologue of, "You failed again. You'll never change. This isn't for you." And that guilt, disguised as high standards, hurt me more than the error itself. Because instead of correcting myself with maturity, I beat myself down with shame. Until I realized that every minute I invested in lamenting was a minute less I invested in correcting. And that the true warrior is not the one who doesn't fall, but the one who gets up without dramatizing. That's when I changed my response to failure. I no longer asked myself why I did it again, but what do I do now to get back on track? I stopped telling myself, I am weak, and instead, I got careless, but here I am again. Because I learned to forgive myself without letting myself off the hook, to acknowledge my stumbles without justifying them, to look at myself with compassion, yes, but also with expectation, because I don't need to be hugged when I fail. I need to get up, to act, to show myself again that I am bigger than my mistake. I turned this principle into a routine. Every time I fall, I have one rule: get up quickly. Do something immediately that reconnects you with your commitment. Don't think about it. Don't debate it. Just do it. Because the faster you act, the less guilt settles in, and the more you fuel movement, the weaker self-pity becomes. I'm not telling you to ignore your emotions. I'm telling you not to turn them into excuses. Because if pain becomes justification, you'll stay there. and I no longer have time to linger on the ground. This habit has saved me more times than I can count. It has brought me back to the path when all seemed lost. It has reminded me that I am human, but also responsible, that I can falter, but never surrender, and that every fall can be the beginning of a new level if I have the courage to rise quickly, not with euphoria, but with humility, not with empty promises, but with real decisions. Today, every time I fall, I get up with greater precision. I no longer need days to start over. A moment of clarity, an action, a step is enough. Because the difference between an ordinary man and an extraordinary one isn't how many times he falls, but how long it takes him to get up. And I choose to be the one who gets up, who brushes himself off, who keeps going, even if it hurts, even if he's alone, even if no one sees him. Because I know that every time I rise faster, I become stronger, more reliable, more unstoppable. And that no one can take away. Furthermore, the seventh principle I firmly established was learning to work without motivation, to do what needs to be done even on the most dull, gray, and empty days. I understood that if my actions depended on how I felt, my life would be held hostage by my emotional states. And emotional states are treacherous. Today you are inspired. Tomorrow you are broken. Today you are euphoric. Tomorrow you don't want to get out of bed. If you don't learn to act without motivation, you will live trapped on a roller coaster where you are never in control. Your mood always decides. For a long time, I waited to feel ready to move. I'd tell myself, I don't have the energy today, better tomorrow. I need to be more focused before starting. I don't want to force myself, because if I do, I'll do a poor job. And behind all those phrases lay one single thing: fear of sustained effort, fear of feeling discomfort, fear of confronting myself in those moments when everything within me screamed, do nothing. But I learned something brutally clear. If you only work when you feel good, you will never achieve anything extraordinary. It was then I made myself a promise. I will act regardless of how I feel. Not because I am a robot, not because I have no emotions, but because my commitment is above my emotional state, because my goals are worth more than my laziness, because my dreams deserve more than my excuses. And from that day, I began to make decisions based on what I should do, not on what I felt like doing. I became someone who, even if the body pleaded for rest, would get up. Who, even if the mind screamed excuses, would persist. Who, even if the soul was silent, would walk. And something powerful began to happen. At first, the effort was cold, without emotion, without immediate reward. But over time, that repetition gave me a confidence I had never felt before, because I began to prove to myself that I was no longer a slave to my impulses, that I could act through pain, through exhaustion, through fear. And that is freedom, that is respect, that is internal leadership. When you do what you must, at the moment you least want to do it, you become a different person. You transform internally. You become unbreakable. Today, I no longer ask if I feel like it. I ask if I have integrity, because motivation comes and goes, but discipline remains. It is what sustains you when everything else crumbles. It is what guides you when there is no clarity. It is what drags you forward when the world seems to stop. And if you learn to move without needing to feel good, then you have crossed a threshold that very few cross. The threshold of those who make history. I don't seek inspiration to begin. I find inspiration in the fact that I didn't give up. Because at the end of the day, what defines a man isn't how he feels, but what he does with what he feels. And I choose to act with fear, with doubt, with uncertainty, but I act. Because while others wait for motivation, I am already working in silence, without noise, without pause. Because I learned that he who masters action without needing stimulus masters his life. And when you reach that point, there is no turning back, only constant, solid, unstoppable progress. Building on this, the eighth principle that transformed me from the deepest level was learning to endure discomfort without seeking escape. Because discomfort is the exact space where real growth occurs, yet most people flee from it. They seek distractions, excuses, immediate pleasures, anything to numb that internal unease. We live in a culture that glorifies comfort, idolizes instant gratification, and trains us to avoid any kind of pain. But nothing valuable is built from comfort. Everything that truly matters, character, strength, direction, is born in the rough terrain of discomfort. I used to evade everything that made me uncomfortable. When a conversation demanded honesty, I would stay silent. When a task became arduous, I would postpone it. When a routine required repetition, it bored me. I'd jump from one thing to another, seeking to feel good, seeking that spark that would re-excite me. But that excitement was a trap. It kept me on the surface, and the more I avoided the difficult, the weaker I became. Until one day, I grew tired of being fragile, tired of feeling like any wind could move me. I decided to stay in the effort, in the pain, in the monotonous task, in the uncomfortable conversation, in the truth that hurts, without running away, without numbing myself. And I discovered something profound. Discomfort is a teacher. It reveals what you lack, confronts you with what you've avoided, shows you the limits you've imposed on yourself. And if you stay long enough, if you don't flee, if you breathe and endure, something within you shifts. A new identity is forged, because the one who sits in their discomfort without seeking immediate escape becomes stronger than any obstacle. They no longer need life to be easy. They become harder to break. I began applying this to everything. When I didn't feel like training, I trained anyway. When anxiety washed over me, I didn't cover it up with social media or food. I stayed there, observing it. When something hurt, I didn't hide it with cheap motivational phrases. I felt it, I moved through it, and each time I emerged on the other side, I felt more in command of myself. Because I was no longer running away, I was strengthening myself from within. This habit changed my pain threshold. What once overwhelmed me now barely shakes me. What once paralyzed me now activates me, because I understood that everything worthwhile was hidden behind the threshold of discomfort. The conversations that transform, the habits that mold character, the processes that yield results, all feel uncomfortable at first. But if you have the courage to stay there, to not run away, you become a person who no longer negotiates with effort, who no longer seeks to feel good, but seeks to do what is right. Today, I live with a firm conviction. If it hurts, it matters. If it's uncomfortable, you're at the exact edge of your next level. And if you have the valor to not flee, that level will be shattered. Because discomfort is not the enemy. It is the threshold. It is the test. It is the door that everyone wants to avoid. And that's why only a few manage to cross it. But if you choose to stay there, enduring, breathing, advancing, you will discover a version of yourself you didn't know existed. And that version no longer flees, no longer surrenders, no longer hides. It simply moves forward. Even if it hurts, especially if it hurts, because that is where true freedom lies. Conversely, the ninth principle that transformed me was understanding that I don't need to be understood. I don't need others to comprehend why I do what I do, why I choose the difficult path, why I isolate myself, why I demand so much of myself. Because on the path of true growth, you will be misunderstood, you will be criticized, you will be misinterpreted. And if you are not prepared for that, you will eventually falter, lower your standards, and adapt to the mediocre mold that most people expect you to fill. But if you are willing to bear the misunderstanding, to advance even when no one understands, you liberate yourself. Because you are no longer walking to be accepted, you are walking to be true. For a long time, I tried to explain my decisions. I tried to convince others that my process was worthwhile. I tried to justify my discipline, my boundaries, my focus. I hoped they would say, "You're right. I admire you." I would do the same. But it didn't happen. What I received was mockery, doubt, questioning. They told me I was missing out on life, that I was exaggerating, that I was alone. And that hurt. Until I realized that what hurt wasn't their lack of understanding. It was my need for approval. That was the breakthrough. When I stopped expecting comprehension, everything became lighter, because I began to choose without asking permission, to advance without having to explain, to maintain my routine without having to justify it, to say no without giving 1,000 reasons. Because my peace doesn't depend on someone understanding my path. It depends on me understanding it, on me feeling it's right, on me being able to sleep soundly knowing I am being true to what I chose. And that is worth more than any applause. I started talking less about what I was going to do, showing less of what I was building, keeping silent when asked, "Why so extreme? What's all this effort for?" Because I no longer need to convince anyone. Those who understand will accompany me. Those who don't can watch from afar. But my path is non-negotiable. My decisions are not open for voting, because when one spends their energy explaining their life, they end up living a life they didn't choose. This habit gave me a freedom I never imagined. The freedom of not belonging, of not fitting in, of not pleasing. Because I am not on this earth to be understood, I am here to fulfill a mission. And that mission often leaves you alone. But it doesn't matter, because it is in that solitude that one sharpens, that one becomes unstoppable, that the character is forged that needs no external validation, only direction, courage, and discipline. Today, I live with a simple rule. If my soul approves, I don't need to explain it to anyone. I don't waste time justifying what is clear to me. I don't expend energy convincing those who don't want to see. I just continue in silence, in peace, with firmness. Because when you stop needing to be understood, you access an inner strength that allows you to move forward without interruptions, without noise, without fear. And that type of strength is learned. It is conquered by walking alone, thinking clearly, living with purpose, even if no one understands, especially if no one understands, because that is the sign that you are already living from within, not from without. Finally, the 10th and most powerful principle that changed my life was this. Everything you need is already within you. Not in your circumstances, not in your connections, not in your external resources. It is in your decision, in your inner strength, in your will to sustain yourself, even when you have nothing else. And you only discover that when you are alone, when there is no one to push you, to lift you, to motivate you, when you are there in silence confronting your fears, your excuses, your exhaustion, and you choose to continue. Not because it's easy, not because someone is watching, but because you have decided never to betray yourself again. My entire life changed when I stopped waiting for something outside. I stopped waiting for ideal conditions. I stopped waiting for the environment to change. I stopped waiting for someone to choose me, to understand me, to help me. And I confronted myself with the hardest and most liberating truth. If I want something, I build it. If something hurts me, I transform it. If something is missing, I seek it. If I fall, I get up. Because no one else will come, no one else will take that responsibility for me. And when you take that truth with both hands and make it part of your identity, something awakens. You become impossible to stop. I began to act as if my life depended solely on me. Because it does. I began to move with urgency, to stop wasting time on things that didn't add value, to cut away what drained me, to work with a silent intensity without asking for permission. I began to walk like someone who already knows the path is long, solitary, and demanding, but also completely transformative. Because while everyone seeks company, shortcuts, quick formulas, I chose the harder path, the one forged in solitude, the one that falls and doesn't give up, the one that doesn't wait for a miracle but becomes one. And yes, it hurts. There will be nights when exhaustion makes you doubt, days when you feel you can't go on, moments when you look around and see no one. But in those moments, if you choose to continue, if you choose to believe in yourself even when you are broken, if you choose to move even when you are afraid, you will discover what the world never taught you. That you can handle anything, that you don't need to be perfect, you just need to be determined, that you don't need to have all the answers, you just need to act from truth, that you don't need applause, only integrity, only internal fire, only that silent scream that tells you, don't. Stop, not now, not like this. That is the moment you stop being someone else. You become your own backup, your own strength, your own reason. You no longer need company. Solitude becomes an ally because you understand that if you can manage with yourself, you can manage with anything. And that is freedom, that is power, that is maturity. The world can tremble, people can come and go, the environment can collapse, but you remain firm because you are no longer depending, you are deciding. You are no longer wishing, you are executing. You are no longer fleeing, you are confronting. That is the man who changes his life, the one who fought alone, who expected nothing, who didn't give up, who chose with every step to be his own answer, his own guide, his own destiny. And when you reach that point, there is no turning back. Because you understood, everything you were searching for was already within you. You just had to decide, you just had to start, you just had to endure the silence and keep going until the end, without stopping, without permission, without fear. No, You've absorbed the profound truth that the wellspring of your strength lies within, a revelation often discovered in the crucible of solitude. Now, consider a further dimension of this inner landscape, the quiet art of cultivating resilience through calculated exposure to calculated risk. This isn't about reckless abandonment. It's about strategically venturing beyond the predictable confines of your comfort zone, not to prove a point to the world, but to expand your internal operating system. Think of it like an athlete who doesn't just practice their best moves, but also trains in varied conditions: wind, rain, uneven terrain. Each new variable hones their adaptive capacity, making them more formidable when the stakes are truly high. Similarly, by intentionally placing yourself in situations where success isn't guaranteed, where minor setbacks are probable, you build an invaluable internal scaffolding. This isn't about seeking failure, but about recognizing that growth blossoms precisely where certainty wanes. Each instance you navigate a novel challenge, even if it results in a less-than-ideal outcome, serves as a powerful diagnostic. It reveals unforeseen strengths, highlights areas needing refinement, and most importantly, desensitizes you to the sting of imperfection. Furthermore, embracing this practice of calculated exposure fundamentally redefines your relationship with what if. Instead of these specters of potential disaster paralyzing you, they transform into navigational markers. When you've experienced, even on a smaller scale, the ripple effects of stepping into the unknown and emerging not unscathed, perhaps, but unbroken, your perception of future obstacles shifts dramatically. Consider the entrepreneur who, after a modest product launch that didn't quite hit its stride, gained invaluable insights into market reception. This initial, less-than-perfect outcome wasn't a testament to their inadequacy, but a critical data point. It provided a clearer roadmap for their next endeavor, building upon lessons learned not from effortless wins, but from the nuanced feedback loop of a less-than-ideal debut. Consequently, the fear of "what if it doesn't work" begins to lose its power, replaced by a more pragmatic "how can I adapt if it doesn't work?" This proactive engagement with potential negative outcomes is not pessimism. It is a profound act of self-empowerment, acknowledging reality while maintaining forward momentum. Another crucial layer to this internal resilience is the deliberate practice of mindful self-observation during moments of friction. When faced with a situation that inherently challenges your comfort or exposes a vulnerability, the natural inclination is to react. However, the mature response, the one that truly solidifies your inner fortitude, is to pause, to witness your internal landscape without judgment. This means noticing the physical sensations of unease, the rapid pulse, the tightness in your chest, as well as the mental narratives that arise, the self-doubt, the urge to withdraw. Instead of immediately acting on these impulses, simply observe them. Acknowledge their presence without letting them dictate your actions. This detached observation cultivates an internal space, a pause between stimulus and response, which is the very hallmark of self-mastery. It's akin to a seasoned negotiator who, even when faced with aggressive tactics, maintains a calm demeanor, observing the other party's strategy rather than mirroring their intensity. Consequently, this conscious engagement with friction builds an unparalleled sense of internal agency. You move from being a passenger in your emotional journey to becoming its discerning conductor. This isn't about suppressing emotions, but about understanding their transient nature and refusing to let them steer the ship indefinitely. Imagine a painter choosing their colors. They don't simply splash whatever pigment is closest. They select with intention, understanding how each hue interacts, how it contributes to the overall composition. Likewise, you learn to choose your responses, not based on the immediate emotional palette, but on the overarching vision you hold for your character and your life. This deliberate cultivation of responsibility, rather than mere reactivity, solidifies your foundation, ensuring that your forward movement is driven by conviction, not by the fleeting currents of circumstance or feeling. Building on this understanding of internal strength, consider the potent practice of cultivating an ethical compass that operates independently of external approval. This involves a deep-seated commitment to a set of core values, not as abstract ideals, but as operational principles that guide every decision. particularly when those decisions are unpopular or inconvenient. Think of a skilled artisan who meticulously selects their materials, ensuring each piece aligns with their vision for enduring quality, regardless of whether the client fully grasps the subtle craftsmanship. Your integrity, similarly, is the foundation of your long-term influence and self-regard. When you consistently act in alignment with your internal ethical framework, even when no one is observing or when the easier path deviates, you forge an unshakable self-trust. This isn't about rigid adherence to dogma, but about developing a nuanced understanding of what constitutes right action for you, a compass calibrated by your deepest convictions, not by prevailing trends or popular opinion. Consequently, this internal alignment fortifies you against the corrosive effects of compromise and external pressure, ensuring your forward momentum is always in service of your authentic self. Furthermore, the development of this ethical bedrock is significantly strengthened by engaging in deliberate acts of constructive self-criticism. This practice differs starkly from self-flagellation. It is a rigorous, yet compassionate, analysis of your choices and actions, aimed not at assigning blame, but at identifying opportunities for refinement. Imagine a scientist meticulously reviewing experimental data, looking for anomalies and potential errors not to discredit their work, but to advance their understanding and improve future outcomes. Similarly, when you can objectively examine your motivations, evaluate the impact of your decisions, and pinpoint where your actions diverge from your intended path, you gain invaluable foresight. This isn't about dwelling on past mistakes, but about dissecting them with the precision of a surgeon to extract actionable intelligence. This process allows you to proactively address potential pitfalls before they become significant obstacles, ensuring your growth is not only consistent but also strategically sound, driven by informed self-correction rather than reactive regret. Another crucial layer to this self-governance involves the cultivation of intellectual independence. In an era saturated with information, the ability to discern truth from noise, to form your own conclusions without passively absorbing external narratives, is paramount. Consider a seasoned explorer who doesn't rely solely on maps provided by others, but who verifies routes, cross-references observations, and trusts their own navigational intuition. Your mind, too, must be trained to critically evaluate information, to question assumptions, and to synthesize diverse perspectives into a coherent understanding. This means actively seeking out dissenting viewpoints, engaging with complex arguments, and resisting the allure of echo chambers. By developing this intellectual agility, you build an internal resilience against manipulation and misinformation, ensuring that your decisions are grounded in reasoned analysis and genuine insight, rather than on the persuasive power of external voices. Consequently, the integration of these practices, ethical self-alignment, constructive self-criticism, and intellectual independence, creates a formidable internal architecture. It's not about being aloof or unconcerned with others, but about establishing an unshakable internal locus of control. This allows you to engage with the world from a position of strength and clarity, contributing authentically without being swayed by external validation or deterred by inevitable friction. When you have this robust internal framework, the challenges that once seemed insurmountable transform into opportunities for further refinement and growth. You become a self-directed force, navigating life not by external decree, but by the unwavering compass of your own well-developed inner principles and keen analytical mind. This internal mastery is the true bedrock upon which lasting achievement and profound personal fulfillment are built, allowing you to stand firm even when the external world shifts and sways. Building on this understanding of internal strength, consider the potent practice of cultivating an ethical compass that operates independently of external approval. This involves a deep-seated commitment to a set of core values, not as abstract ideals, but as operational principles that guide every decision, particularly when those decisions are unpopular or inconvenient. Think of a skilled artisan who meticulously selects their materials, ensuring each piece aligns with their vision for enduring quality, regardless of whether the client fully grasps the subtle craftsmanship. Your integrity, similarly, is the foundation of your long-term influence and self-regard. When you consistently act in alignment with your internal ethical framework, even when no one is observing or when the easier path deviates, you forge an unshakable self-trust. This isn't about rigid adherence to dogma, but about developing a nuanced understanding of what constitutes right action for you, a compass calibrated by your deepest convictions, not by prevailing trends or popular opinion. Consequently, this internal alignment fortifies you against the corrosive effects of compromise and external pressure, ensuring your forward momentum is always in service of your authentic self. Furthermore, the development of this ethical bedrock is significantly strengthened by engaging in deliberate acts of constructive self-criticism. This practice differs starkly from self-flagellation. It is a rigorous, yet compassionate, analysis of your choices and actions, aimed not at assigning blame, but at identifying opportunities for refinement. Imagine a scientist meticulously reviewing experimental data, looking for anomalies and potential errors not to discredit their work, but to advance their understanding and improve future outcomes. Similarly, when you can objectively examine your motivations, evaluate the impact of your decisions, and pinpoint where your actions diverged from your intended path, you gain invaluable foresight. This isn't about dwelling on past mistakes, but about dissecting them with the precision of a surgeon to extract actionable intelligence. This process allows you to proactively address potential pitfalls before they become significant obstacles, ensuring your growth is not only consistent but also strategically sound, driven by informed self-correction rather than reactive regret. Another crucial layer to this self-governance involves the cultivation of intellectual independence. In an era saturated with information, the ability to discern truth from noise, to form your own conclusions without passively absorbing external narratives, is paramount. Consider a seasoned explorer who doesn't rely solely on maps provided by others, but who verifies routes, cross-references observations, and trusts their own navigational intuition. Your mind, too, must be trained to critically evaluate information, to question assumptions, and to synthesize diverse perspectives into a coherent understanding. This means actively seeking out dissenting viewpoints, engaging with complex arguments, and resisting the allure of echo chambers. By developing this intellectual agility, you build an internal resilience against manipulation and misinformation, ensuring that your decisions are grounded in reasoned analysis and genuine insight, rather than on the persuasive power of external voices. Consequently, the integration of these practices, ethical self-alignment, constructive self-criticism, and intellectual independence, creates a formidable internal architecture. It's not about being aloof or unconcerned with others, but about establishing an unshakable internal locus of control. This allows you to engage with the world from a position of strength and clarity, contributing authentically without being swayed by external validation or deterred by inevitable friction. When you have this robust internal framework, the challenges that once seemed insurmountable transform into opportunities for further refinement and growth. You become a self-directed force, navigating life not by external decree, but by the unwavering compass of your own well-developed inner principles and keen analytical mind. This internal mastery is the true bedrock upon which lasting achievement and profound personal fulfillment are built, allowing you to stand firm even when the external world shifts and sways. Building upon the foundation of inner resilience and ethical alignment, we now delve into the dynamic practice of active mentorship and strategic knowledge integration. This isn't about seeking external validation, but about proactively engaging with sources of wisdom that can refine your understanding and accelerate your growth. Consider a master craftsman not only honing their own skills, but also actively studying the techniques of historical masters, analyzing their innovations, and understanding the context in which those innovations arose. This comparative study doesn't diminish the craftsman's own expertise. Rather, it deepens it, offering new perspectives and methodologies. Similarly, when you consciously seek out mentors, not for emotional support, but for their strategic insights and proven methodologies, you are engaging in a powerful form of accelerated learning. This means identifying individuals who have navigated similar challenges and achieved the outcomes you aspire to, and then actively dissecting their approach. This involves going beyond superficial admiration and delving into the how and why of their success, understanding the underlying principles and adaptable strategies they employed. Furthermore, the integration of this external wisdom requires a critical filter, a discerning mind that separates transferable principles from context-specific tactics. Just as a botanist studies various ecosystems to understand universal laws of growth, you must learn to extract the timeless elements from diverse experiences. For instance, a leader who successfully navigated a corporate crisis might offer insights into crisis communication and stakeholder management. While the specific industry or company context may differ, the underlying principles of transparency, decisiveness, and empathy can be universally applied. This discerning application allows you to leverage the collective intelligence of those who have walked the path before, without blindly replicating their every move. It's about harvesting the fruits of their experience to fertilize your own unique journey, ensuring that your forward movement is informed by a rich tapestry of knowledge. Conversely, the process also involves becoming a conduit for knowledge yourself, not for ego, but for impact. This means actively articulating your own evolving understanding, teaching what you are learning, and sharing your journey with those who can benefit. When you take on the role of educating others, even in a nascent stage, you solidify your own comprehension. Explaining a complex concept forces you to organize your thoughts, identify gaps in your understanding, and articulate the core principles with clarity. Think of a music teacher who, in explaining scales and harmonies to a student, not only reinforces the student's learning, but also deepens their own appreciation for the nuances of musical theory. This act of sharing creates a feedback loop of learning and refinement, ensuring that your knowledge is not static, but dynamic and ever-expanding. This reciprocal engagement with knowledge, both absorbing and disseminating, creates a powerful ecosystem of continuous growth and intellectual vitality. Another crucial layer to this integration is the practice of scenario-based anticipation, a proactive mental exercise that leverages your accumulated knowledge. This involves not just learning from past successes and failures, but actively projecting those lessons into potential future scenarios. Imagine a chess grandmaster visualizing countless move sequences, anticipating their opponent's countermoves, and planning several steps ahead. Similarly, you can mentally rehearse how you would apply your learned principles in various hypothetical situations, from navigating a difficult negotiation to responding to unexpected market shifts. This proactive mental engagement allows you to develop contingency plans and refine your response strategies before they are critically needed. It's about building a mental library of adaptive responses, drawing from the diverse wisdom you've integrated, and preparing yourself to act with informed confidence when faced with the unforeseen. This active foresight transforms potential crises into manageable challenges, underscoring the power of integrating knowledge not just for understanding, but for proactive application. Reflecting on this journey thus far, a profound shift in perspective begins to crystallize. The echoes of past dependencies and the limitations they imposed are fading, replaced by the quiet hum of an emerging self-sufficiency. We have navigated the landscapes of internal struggle, acknowledged the subtle yet pervasive power of ingrained beliefs, and begun to reframe our understanding of genuine strength. It's as if a carefully constructed scaffolding, built from external validation and reliance, is gradually being dismantled, not to leave one exposed, but to reveal the bedrock of self-reliance upon which a more enduring structure can be erected. The subtle alchemy of turning perceived limitations into catalysts for inner transformation is underway, a process that redefines the very essence of personal agency. In light of these coalescing insights, the path ahead, though perhaps still undefined in its specifics, gains an unmistakable clarity of direction. The lessons learned are not isolated occurrences, but integral threads weaving a richer tapestry of being. This convergence suggests a profound recalibration, a move from seeking external anchors to cultivating an internal locus of control, where one's own volition becomes the primary determinant of progress. It's akin to shifting from navigating by the stars of external opinion to charting a course by the internal compass of conviction, a journey that naturally leads to a deeper, more authentic sense of purpose and direction. The resonance of this internal guidance system is becoming undeniable, a quiet yet powerful force shaping future actions. As we pivot towards the final reflection, consider how these various dimensions of personal evolution interlock. The awareness cultivated, the resilience forged, the ethical grounding established. These are not separate achievements, but interconnected facets of a holistic transformation. They speak to a more integrated self, one that is not merely surviving but actively thriving, capable of responding to life's complexities with both wisdom and fortitude. This emergent self-awareness acts as a clarifying lens, revealing the interconnectedness of our internal state and our external reality, suggesting that true mastery lies not in controlling the world, but in mastering oneself within it. The cumulative effect is not simply a collection of strategies, but a fundamental reorientation towards an empowered existence. The culmination of this journey is not a destination reached, but a profound understanding that the deepest wellspring of power has always resided within you. The quest for external validation, the desperate need for constant affirmation, the reliance on others to dictate your worth, these are echoes of a past self, a self conditioned by the belief that strength was a borrowed commodity. Now, you recognize that true resilience isn't about avoiding the storm, but about becoming the steadfast anchor within it. It's the quiet, unwavering conviction that arises when you've faced your own shadows and emerged not unscathed, but undeniably whole. This realization isn't a passive acceptance. It's an active embrace of your own formidable capacity. It's the understanding that the most potent force in your life is not the applause of the crowd, but the silent nod of self-respect earned through consistent, unyielding commitment to your own inner truth, even when no one is watching. This is the essence of true independence, not a defiant isolation, but a powerful self-reliance that allows for genuine connection. When your foundation is unshakable, built not on shifting sands of external opinion, but on bedrock principles forged in the quiet crucible of self-mastery, your interactions with the world transform. You offer presence, not need, wisdom, not dependency, strength, not fragility. The external landscape, once a series of perceived obstacles or dependencies, now becomes a canvas upon which your inner resolve can paint its own masterpiece. The challenges that once loomed large now appear as opportunities, not to be conquered by external force, but to be navigated with internal grace and unwavering purpose. Your journey has been a testament to this truth, that the most profound transformations occur when the gaze turns inward, not in retreat, but in a powerful rediscovery of inherent capabilities. The true practice begins now. It is not in grand gestures, but in the quiet consistency of daily choices. It is in recognizing that the strength you seek is not found in another's hand, but in the steady rhythm of your own resolve. It is in the understanding that your potential is not a gift to be bestowed, but a fire within to be tended, a light to be ignited and guided by your own unyielding will. Embrace this realization not as an endpoint, but as the dawning of a new era of authentic power. Stand firm, move forward with intention, and know that the journey itself, when undertaken from this place of internal sovereignty, is the ultimate testament to your uncontainable power.